Think modular first if you're a developer. What part of this project can we prefabricate offsite? If it's going to take you 24 months to build a multifamily project and now it takes 18, it may cost more per square foot up front. But you got to factor in that 6 months of revenue you're going to get. So we said, your local guys can build 100% of 100 homes, or they can build 50% of 2,000 homes, and we can get people back in their houses faster if we work together. Are we construction or are we manufacturing? And the answer is yes. I'm a big Bob Dylan fan. The times they are changing just kind of popped into my head when you asked me that.
Today on Most Podern, we talk with Tom Hardiman of the Modular Building Institute about how modular construction can help restore affordability, cut waste, and speed up delivery at a moment when America urgently needs smarter and more sustainable ways to build.
Most Podern.
Well, welcome to Most Podern, Tom Hardiman. Great to have you.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
So we're talking about modular construction today, a topic that I think a lot of us feel like we know something about, but maybe don't know everything about, and that's why you're here. So just to jump right in, I'm curious if you could share with us what really drew you to the world of modular construction, and maybe what was surprising when you got there?
Well, this is my origin story. I knew nothing about modular construction when I was hired as the director of the Modular Building Institute. My background is actually in small business development, insurance, and banking, and I got into association management. And in 2004, saw this opening in Charlottesville, Virginia, for the Modular Building Institute, and I thought, that looks interesting. Charlottesville's a beautiful place. Had a newborn daughter that I needed to support, so we packed up and moved to Charlottesville and learned on the fly about modular construction. I know how to run an association. I just needed to learn the lingo a little bit there.
And so that's 2004, you're saying. What did MBI, the Modular Building Institute, what did the sort of landscape of modular construction look like?
Yeah, it was interesting. Literally, when the board hired me, they said, if anyone has heard of modular, it's not good. It's bad press. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay, what am I walking into here? And just for context, MBI is the trade association, the Modular Building Institute, that represents the modular industry. So, yeah, it was a couple hundred members. It was dealing with a lot of bad press and negative perceptions. And immediately everyone, you say modular and people, oh, you mean trailers? No, I don't mean trailers. It was just constantly trying to overcome negative perceptions and negative press.
So let's turn that around. Let's put a positive perception on modular. What is modular construction? What do you promote? Why should we care?
Okay, so our definition of modular construction, and we'll get into this in a little bit, we're talking about three-dimensional volumetric boxes that are built offsite in a factory, building components, if you will. Those boxes are transported to the site and then assembled, stacked up, to create a full building. So we're talking about volumetric modular. I think the word modular more recently has been a broad term to mean anything prefabricated off-site. It could be a panelized system, a hospital head wall, a bathroom pod. That's the broad version of it that I think most people probably think of when they hear modular. For us, it's a little more specifically defined as we want to do as much off-site as possible, put it in a box, ship that box to the site. So
how much can you move offsite?
Literally 80-90% of the building itself. Common markets for us are hospitality and multifamily. We're seeing some of the hotel developers, they're actually shipping the furniture, fixture, and equipments to the factory so that when that box gets shipped, it's kind of like a hotel room. Fully furnished, the bedding, the pillows, the toilet paper, all boxed in there. They start stacking those modules together and they have a hotel under roof in, a matter of weeks.
I mean, I think for us architects and people in AEC, it makes sense, to try to create a little bit more efficiency. But for the common person out there, what are you getting when you get a modular building? What are the advantages and what makes this an important innovation in construction?
Great question. We get that one a lot. There's a couple key benefits. The first is schedule certainty, the speed of construction. That's really critical for developers, schools, healthcare facilities. Time is critical. So if we can cut months off of that projected construction timeline, that's quicker return on investment, quicker cash flow for those developers, those hospitals, those schools. Speed is the big one, and if you think about it, you're really you have two construction sites. You're working on your foundation, you're working on everything that needs to be done on site. At the same time, you're constructing the building off site in a factory. So you've really expedited the schedule. So speed's the big advantage. Another important factor for the end user is the quality control. There is so much more quality control, so many more checkpoints that happen in that building before it leaves the factory. There are quality control checks along the way down the assembly line so that when it gets to site, you're going to have a well-built, robust building, final product. Then I'll throw one more in there, and this is a little bigger picture. Wasn't a big driver when I started. It's becoming more of a driver, and that is sustainability. There's much less waste when you build this way in a factory. Any leftover materials get put back on the factory shelf. They don't go in that dumpster on site that you see at every traditional project. The construction industry, as you guys know, huge contributor to landfill waste. So our industry is trying to make that pile a little smaller.
Why is it important for MBI to make the distinction that modular for definition for you is volumetric, as opposed to maybe smaller level components and the overall mission of kind of moving as much work offsite as possible?
Well, that's kind of a legacy of the trade association that, we were founded to serve that niche of the industry. And if you know anything about trade associations, there's one for every product, service, profession out there. Sometimes there's two or three. So there are other groups that might do pre-engineered wall. There's a panelized organization out there. So there's some other related associations out there. But for us, by and large, bathroom pods, that's a volumetric box, kitchen pods. We're even starting to see more industrial applications, data centers, MEP subassemblies. So we don't throw them out of the industry. We're kind of try to stay in our lane a little bit with that volumetric construction sector.
So a little bit more expose. What does the ecosystem of the modular construction industry look like? We imagine that if it's a traditional build, you have the architect, you have the owner, and you have the contractor. The contractor builds the thing on site, builds what the architecture has spec'd. How does a modular factory, you're saying, how do these other subcontractors, how do they fit into the equation for a project?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a before and after. In the old days, we were very siloed. It was either site built or modular, and the modular industry would have its own network of general contractors and architects that understood it. Really, probably since COVID, we have integrated our industry much more into traditional construction. We have more developers that are members now, more architects that are members now. So the process is similar. There's a developer, they hire an architect, they design a building, they may hire a GC. The modular manufacturer typically acts as a subcontractor to that GC on a site, kind of a super sub, if you will. Hey, I need plumbing, electrical, mechanical, drywall, carpentry, etc. Put it all together in the factory and bring me one product at the end of the day. So it's similar, but there are some differences along the way. I'm sure we'll talk about some of those here in a minute.
So I imagine that the coordination involved with modular construction is very different than what folks are used to in a traditional construction site. When maybe a team is approaching this for for the first time, like how do you put the right people together? How do you tell them this is how you coordinate and how you work together to put a modular building in place?
Yeah, that is a crucial part to a successful modular project. You want to bring that manufacturer to the table early. We always suggest think modular first if you're a developer. What part of this project can we prefabricate offsite? Maybe that's modular, panelized, pods, whatever. But have that mentality first. And then if that doesn't work, you can default back to site built. It's hard to do it the other way. When you design it and plan it to be site built, and then you say, let me find a modular company that can modularize this. You want that modular factory in early on those design conversations because they can give you tips to the architect saying, I see your design. If you would change this wall a little or put this bathroom over here, that would be more efficient for us to manufacture in our facility, and that would save you time and money. So you want those early conversations to happen with the manufacturer.
What are those considerations that a developer should have? I'm finding increasingly that developers are saying, oh, could it be modular? But sometimes I feel like they're doing that simply because they think that the per square foot cost or the per unit cost is going to be cheaper without understanding the additional complications that might arrive on site.
Yeah, and Alex, that's a great point. We often get that question. Well, it's cheaper, right? It's going to be cheap. The answer is no, not necessarily. It's not necessarily cheaper up front, per square foot. It may be more. But if you look at that entire construction schedule, if it's going to take you 24 months to build a multifamily project, and now it takes 18, it may cost more per square foot up front. But you got to factor in that 6 months of revenue you're going to get. Sometimes we see projects that won't pencil, won't make sense if it's traditional, and they look at it as modular and say, oh, this will work if we do it this way because we're getting revenue in months 19 through 24 where there were zeros in there if we were site building it. So if you're looking at it to save money, that's probably not an ideal situation. If you're looking at it to get my building open sooner, to have more labor efficiency, to have, some of those other advantages, yeah, I would say it's a good fit. But you're right. We get that question like, it's cheaper, right? And it's like, not necessarily.
I appreciate you being forward with us. I mean, it is interesting because as all of us know, the development process is about space, but it's also about time. How much time you're using to build the building, how much time you're spending to hold the site, you're paying interest on that. And then, as you said, how quickly can you return some revenue? So it is interesting in that you talk about it volumetrically, but it really also deals with this fourth dimension that we often overlook in the built environment.
Absolutely. The old saying, time is money. So, that's what we're delivering is speed, schedule certainty, which often gets overlooked. How many traditional projects go over budget, over schedule? Almost all of them. So by having those early conversations with the factory, basically what you're doing is locking in. We've got the design, we've got the contractor, we've got the factory. There needs to be a design freeze. It really limits the number of change orders that happen down the line because you can't. If once that factory starts building, it's like an assembly line. There may be a box a day coming out of there. And if the architect or the owner comes back a week later and says, wait a second, we want to change something. We got to go change 20 boxes. We've already built them. So some people see that as a negative. I see it. It's like early communication. Make sure everyone's on the same page before we hit the go button, because after we hit the go button, it's going to be more costly to make changes down the line. So it really encourages that early communication.
Yeah, and also speaking as someone who tries to deliver housing, having some certainty as to what your materials are going to cost and locking that in is really great. You don't want to design a project and then it gets delayed and then inflation happens and tariffs happen and suddenly your project is out of budget.
Tariffs.
Well, there's bound to be pushback from architects, right? Like I feel like reputationally, architects do love making last minute changes so the design could be a little bit more perfect. But you did mention that there are now increasingly more and more architects who have joined the MBI. So what has made them change their mind? How have they changed the way they approach design with modular?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started, we used to spend money and put a booth at the AIA show and try to reach architects. And boy, I can't tell how many architects would walk by our booth and we just get like dirty looks, like modular. Ugh. I'm not even going to break my stride. I'm just going to keep on going past this booth. And now they're joining, they're paying dues to belong. And we're like, whoa, what happened? A lot of them are saying, kind of what we talked about at the beginning. We're hearing a lot about this. We want to understand it. We want to understand how we can fit in this ecosystem, how you fit into ours. That's really changed the culture of our association because we have, we go to our conferences now, we have any number of architects that will do presentations on projects they've designed and delivered. And in the past, it was like, it was hard to get an architect to talk to us. So that dynamics really changed our member makeup and really probably brought us a little more into the mainstream of construction than we were in the past.
I'm sure you also are getting more feedback. There's more data. People are seeing it occur as, you sort of snowball. Curious, maybe you can give some examples of really successful modular projects and also maybe some examples where things haven't gone the right way and what you've learned from them as an association.
Yeah, there are, again, I'm old, so I've been doing this 21 years. I'm going back to when I started. If someone built a 4-story modular project, we were all like, wow, 4 stories, look at this is amazing. Now it's just very commonplace. A real sweet spot for our industry is that 4 to 6 story multifamily, over a mixed use. There's maybe a concrete podium with retail on the bottom and 4 stories of modular housing on top. Very common. That happens all the time. There's so many of those that are out there that are successful. If you really want to go way, 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 way back, you've got Disney's Contemporary Resort built in 1971. That's modular. It was U.S. Steel built those modules that went into those rooms. The Hilton Hotel on the San Antonio Riverwalk, built in 1969 by Zachary Construction. Modular, concrete modules, still generating revenue. So it's not a new idea. It's just, I think like a lot of other things in life, it's different, and a lot of people don't necessarily embrace change. The construction industry in particular is reluctant to embrace change. So it's been a little slow to catch on in a lot of sectors, I guess it's fair to say.
I think we can all agree that on the surface, modular seems more efficient. It feels like you have a little bit more certainty and potentially more control over the final product. But one criticism, and I think this is maybe a little bit of those dirty looks you used to get from architects, is that you are constrained by the form, by the materials, by creatively what you can do with buildings. And there is a concern potentially that if we have the same type of building over and over and over again, the American city becomes somewhat repetitive. I'm curious what your guys' stance is on that, and how, one, if you acknowledge that that's valid, and also if that's something that you're working on and your associates and your members are thinking about, how do we make modular but make it special, make it unique?
Yeah, those are lies, Alex. Those are all lies you just said. We hear that one a lot. We're building to the same building code as traditional construction, the same materials. We're just putting the pieces together a little differently. We're putting together offsite, bringing the pieces assembled to the site, if you want to think about it in its simplest term. The design, the exterior, the setting could look like whatever the architect wants it to look like. We've got buildings in the Southwest that look like they blend right in. We've got buildings in urban infill that look like they fit right in. So that's what we're trying to say, is we should do a better job of standardizing the box size. So there are transportation limitations. You got to have certain box sizes you can't exceed. But what's on the outside or what's on the inside of that box, for that matter, is really, sky's the limit. So they can, be designed to look like whatever you want them to, with an understanding that we want this to be designed for a manufacturing process. We've got to be able to make it in the factory without it costing a fortune. And that's kind of where we are as an industry. We're in this middle land of, are we construction or are we manufacturing? And the answer is yes. But where are we on that continuum? That's the conversation we're having right now, which is really what makes it so interesting. It's like we're standing in the middle of the construction industry as it's changing more towards a manufacturing centric process, more towards, I don't want to go to automation and robotics and AI, but those are certainly having a factor on the construction industries.
Well, I guess what I want to get out in front of is, maybe some people have this impression that modular means that there's 5 different unit types across, that you can pick and you just deploy them, basically stack the boxes, and we get the same building over and over again. I mean, I do think that this idea that we're moving more towards manufacturing is interesting. And I think a lot of people would be fascinated to see how manufacturing and sort of larger design questions can come together to create not just advanced manufacturing, but more creative manufacturing, more unique manufacturing. And as you mentioned too, I'm sure your constituents, your members are in all sorts of different climates with all sorts of different requirements. So it doesn't inherently, I guess, it cannot be completely standardized.
Well, and I think, Alex, you've kind of touched on why hasn't it scaled up more? It's because every project seems to be a one-off, custom, bespoke work of art. And for a manufacturing based industry, that's not a great business model. It would be better if we had, I'm manufacturer X and I've got 20 different module configurations. Now you could put those together however you want, but those are the 20 that I make. We're not like that at all right now. Right now it's give me the designs, we'll figure it out on the assembly line. And I talked to a builder recently who's building a beautiful home. 4,000 square foot home. It has 9 modules. 8 of them are different sizes. And I'm like, my gosh, you're killing your manufacturer. 8 different box sizes for a 9 box house. What if that was 4 different box sizes? Wouldn't that have allowed the manufacturer to make it less expensively and quicker? Well, yeah. But this is the way the architect designed it. It's like, okay, there's still a disconnect there. Where's that sweet spot of, I still want my home or my building to look unique and special, but I got to gain those efficiencies from modular construction. And that's what we're still trying to find, that sweet spot, honestly.
So I think standardization is a pretty interesting question. It's one of those things that I think from a design standpoint, we like to push against because we do like to make everything a little bit special with a little bit of special flair. But it's also the problem that I think we're in terms of our ability to deliver things like housing. I think right now you're seeing this trend of a lot of change in not only people's attitudes, but also local politicians starting to rally kind of behind affordable housing and some of these things. One of the major barriers is these different rules, zoning, codes that apply to each of the local cities. So, how has that impacted the modular industry kind of as you guys rise in popularity and come into the mainstream?
Yeah, that's a lot of what our trade association does, is that education and outreach to local, state, federal regulatory bodies. A lot of them just don't understand modular. We kind of get lumped in with HUD code manufactured housing. And there's a real distinction there. That is built to a federal standard, which was intended to address affordability. Modular is built to the same local codes as if we build in New York City, it's got to meet New York City codes. If we build in Miami, it's got to meet wind zones in Miami. There's no federal standard. It's that education piece. It's like, oh, this is manufactured, it goes over here, and we have to step in and say, no, this is modular. It meets the same codes. There shouldn't be zoning restrictions, et cetera. But there are tens of thousands of building code officials across our country, and they're not all on the same level of, understanding of this process as we'd like for them to be. So that's an ongoing concern for us.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how education plays a role in your job, Tom. And I think, I can think of probably a ton of architects that I know, and developers as well, who feel like they want to know more about modular. They feel like this sounds like a great idea, but maybe they just don't know where to start, or they don't feel like they're a modular architect or they're a modular developer. What would you say to them, and where should they find out more, essentially?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Our trade association, we're a nonprofit trade association, so we exist to provide information about the modular construction industry. Modular.org. We have research papers there. We have all of our upcoming events, all of our directory. Everything you can think of for modular is on that hub. Another point about architects, particularly the ones currently in school, big move we've seen in the last 10 years is more schools of architecture, engineering, and construction management are teaching this at the college level now, instead of people graduating and having no clue of what it is, and we have to spend marketing money and outreach money. They're now learning it coming out of school. So this whole next generation of architects, CMs, engineers, they're coming out pretty well versed on this subject. So we think that's going to really help us in terms of adoption and scaling up.
What's made modular really attractive to schools?
Well, I think the schools that are embracing it, and there's probably 20 that we work with on a regular basis, they understand. They see that this is part of the construction industry. This is a growing part. We're projected to outpace the overall construction industry over the next 5 years. So it's going to continue to grow. And then just those challenges that are driving people there anyway, the housing, major lack of housing, and reduction in skilled labor. The trades people are getting older and retiring, and young people are not necessarily lining up to enter the trades. So all those factors are kind of swirling around, and I think those schools are starting to say we need to be teaching this, and it sets them apart a little bit too from the ones that aren't. So many schools, Colorado State's doing it. University of New Brunswick has its own offsite research center. University of Alberta. We've worked with all these schools for really the last 10, 12 years. They'll write research papers. They'll send their students to our conference, our World of Modular conference. That was a bit of an eye opener for us when some students started coming, and we said, "Oh, we got to take advantage of this." We're starting to offer scholarships now for college students to come to our show, to meet our members, to sit in, to learn about it. As if we don't start getting younger people in our industry, we're going to just be like the traditional construction industry where you just can't find workers. So we're paying to send them to our conference. I don't know if it's a great idea to send a bunch of college students to Las Vegas for a conference, but here we are.
A little bit of good trouble, perhaps. But I'm curious here because, we talk about the housing shortage. That's a major issue facing America. I don't think it's a red or blue issue. It's just an American issue. And then, there's this idea that, and I think it's also shared maybe on both sides of the aisle, that we need to be able to build more in America. And you're talking about the labor shortage, especially the skilled labor shortage. We've had guests on the podcast before who are trying to work on that. I'm curious what it's like maybe working in a modular construction factory. Like, what would be the pitch to somebody who is trying to forge a career and wants to do something, but maybe feels like they're not traditional construction is not accessible to them, or it's not something they necessarily want to do? Is this something that you think could really make a difference in the labor market and prospects for young Americans?
Yeah, I do, and I think that was a little bit of our aha moment. The construction industry has always said, we need to do a better job of marketing to young people and get them excited about a career in construction. And it's like, guess what? They're not. They're just not. But then we started saying, well, maybe they might be more interested in a career in modular construction where you're in a factory. We've got factories that have, millions of dollars worth of robotic equipment, and they need programmed. Someone's got to program this gigantic robot to build a home. I mean, to me, you start talking about, okay, now you're integrating technology into the construction industry. That might appeal to young people. You get to see your finished product quicker. You get a little more instant gratification. We built that home in 1 week. It's out the door, and I saw it, and I was part of it. Versus if you're a contractor and you're on the framing crew, we framed it, we're gone, we're out to the next job. We framed it, we're gone. You don't get to be part of the whole process, the whole project, and see it from start to finish. So I think that's appealing to some people. The thing that really excites me is we are not limited in the factory to some big burly guy that can pick up a 50-pound bundle of shingles and climb a ladder. No, we can have we have small women working in the factory because all they have to do is, I need to be able to program this arm to pick up this piece of plywood and bring it over here. Disabled people, they can work in a factory. Can't always access a job site, but they can work in a factory. So I think we need to tap into those underserved markets, and there's lots of them, that the construction industry just either can't or has forgotten about. Women, minorities, younger people, disabled people. There's no reason why they can't work in a modular factory, but there may be real limitations on site.
I find it a really interesting and compelling connection between two major problems that this country is facing. And obviously it's not going to solve everything, but it feels like it could advance the discussion and advance the problems a little bit more, kind of from two ends. So
I think so. And then you add in this is a more sustainable building process. And I think that really starts to appeal to young people too. It's like we can build housing and it's more sustainable, less waste. So you're kind of checking more boxes for young people. I don't want to say it's, our companies are in it for the profit. Let's not kid ourselves, or they wouldn't be in business. They've got to make a profit or they won't be in business. But why not do that while addressing some societal issues like housing, like climate change, like worker safety? We've had people that work in these factories for 20, 30 years. They go to their factory, they show up, they do their shift, they go home, spend time with their family. They're not traveling job site to job site every week and, staying in hotels. And so it's more stable, safe, sustainable work environment. Man, did I check all the boxes there yet?
Get up as early as a traditional contractor, maybe a little bit more scheduling certainty as well.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think we covered a lot of pros this past half hour. So if modular is so much faster, safer, and more efficient, why aren't we seeing more of it?
It's different. It's different. Everything about construction was written for a site-built world. From the building codes, the procurement, the contracts, the insurance, the financing, the subcontract, everything. And then we come along and say, yeah, but we need to change the way you finance this. It's a little different. We need to change this contract because it's a little different. And the construction industry pushes back so hard on different. It may be more efficient. It may be better, but this is easier. I understand this. It's easier. I don't have time to learn this new thing that you're talking about. Even though this new thing's been around for 100 years, status quo is the biggest barrier to our adoption. Construction today is much, much more global an industry than it's always been very local, very regional, which lends itself to political speak. Local jobs, local workers. I want people in my town building housing for my people. That's great. That's a perfect world. It just doesn't happen. A lot of towns don't have labor to build housing. So, we come along and say, well, the factory may be one state away, but we're going to help. There's still a lot of local work, a lot of local site work, but half the work's going to be done in the next state over. That's not a winning political statement if you're running for office. So there's a lot of politics involved in construction, believe it or not. Maui is a great example. The wildfires there destroyed 2,000 homes. They wanted local contractors to rebuild 2,000 homes. Well, good luck. The contractors' homes got burned. There's not that many. Very pro-labor governor, very pro-labor state. And we said, we can help. Even when you build a modular project, about half the work is done on site. Half the value is still site work. So we said, your local guys can build 100% of 100 homes, or they can build 50% of 2,000 homes, and we can get people back in their houses faster if we work together. So that's our message. We're not trying to take jobs away from locals. We're saying we could build it more efficiently, more sustainably if we work together. Sometimes that's a winning argument, sometimes it's not.
Well, it is a real problem, to be honest, in terms of implementation. I come from San Francisco, where we can't really build modular because the unions have petitioned, they've lobbied against it. How do you deal with that? And I mean, I think you come on our show, Tom, and you give a pretty clear and pragmatic reason for why modular works at a societal level. But now we're dealing with, like you said, politics. So I'm sure a lot of your work involves those sort of negotiations.
What's the cost per square foot to build in San Francisco? It's the highest in the country. New York City and San Francisco, it's the highest in the country. And that's not sustainable. We can't keep building that $1,000 a square foot or whatever it costs. How we deal with it now is we don't build in San Francisco. Our companies say, well, we'll build somewhere else. We'll bypass San Francisco and go. Or, there are some factories, and we're not union or non-union. We have some factories that are have labor representation, but that's their choice. We don't really take a stance on that. But that's a tough one. Their business model does not align well with our business model, and that's really all it is. You can get into the trenches and talk, politics and whatever, but their business model is local jobs for local people in these separate trades. And we're saying we're over here in a factory and assembly line, this guy may be on this side of the floor and then walk over to the other side of the floor that afternoon. So it's not as segregated by trades in a factory as it is on site, which makes it a little more efficient, by the way. But that is not a winning argument with organized labor. Their model is, I got to collect dues from this group of people. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm open to having that conversation. I'm very candid about it. It may work in some places, it may not. We do have factories that say, if I ship into San Francisco, you better believe I'm using union contractors in the city. They have to, or there's going to be problems on that project. So
you bring up a point, which is that in general, in traditional construction, you have different trades. So there's the plumbers, there's the electricians. They all have their own representation, their own values and agendas as well. Versus modular, maybe it's a little bit more flattened.
Yeah, it's kind of all these trades are happening in a factory, and you can't just pick up the construction rules and drop them in a factory. Because, what about the person programming that piece of, that robot? What trade is that? That's not a trade. Oregon just passed a bill to expand their prevailing wage laws, their union rates, back into our factories. And we're like, it just doesn't fit. You can't pick up trade laws and drop them in a factory. And now they're trying to write the rules and we're working with them. And it's just real clunky. It just makes things much more bureaucratic than it needs to be. And I'll be darned if the guys from the electrical, plumbing, mechanical didn't testify. They said this. It's not fair. The modular guys, it takes us 3 hours to do what they can do in 1 hour in a factory. It's not fair. You need to impose our rules on them. It's like to make them less efficient. It's like we're going about this the wrong way, guys. If it takes you 3 hours to do what we can do for 1 hour in a factory, why aren't we doing more of this and figuring out how to work together instead of imposing more rules on the factory to make them less efficient?
Well, it is disruptive potentially, but I think that this is the sort of thing where we have to make trade-offs as a society. How do we manage it? How do we make sure that people who have traditionally done one thing are not completely obsolete right away? Are there paths for people who are working in traditional construction to work in modular, for instance?
Absolutely. And I would love it if, someone towards the end of their career on traditional construction, let's get them in the factory for those last 5 years of their career where it's a little safer, a little more controlled environment. They could be teaching the next generation about everything they learned on site and how these things go together. That would be invaluable if, those veteran site workers, let's get them back into the factory for the last 5 years of their career and teach the next generation. Totally up into that idea. The back on the trade side, the carpenters union has largely figured this out. They said, yeah, we understand it. We want to be part of this modular thing. We'll go to these factories and say, everyone in here can be represented by the carpenters union, regardless of what trade they're doing. So there's a factory in San Francisco that has a carpenters agreement. And for that reason, they can go into San Francisco and say, we do have union laborers. We've got carpenters. The other trades didn't necessarily like that because the carpenters kind of took all the workers. But there is a path forward to work with the trades and the unions and the politicians and the housing problems. I get a little frustrated because I'm like, the answers are there. We either don't have the leadership or the willpower to make those decisions. We got more money than we know what to do with, and we have the highest homeless population anywhere. And it's frustrating sometimes, but I don't want to go dark on you here too much.
No, I mean, I sympathize. I think we sympathize, and I think it makes the work meaningful. And I think there's a lot of people out there who see the problems and are trying to be part of the solution. And like you said, sometimes things are just too darn bureaucratic.
Yeah, and we're not. I don't want to get on my high horse here and pretend like we're this magic answer to everyone's problems. We're not, but we should be a tool in everyone's tool belt. Government should say, what about modular? Can we leverage that more than we have in the past? We should be a bigger part of the housing crisis, solving that problem. Right now we're, that 5%, like I think it'll grow to 10%, over the next 5 years, but it's still relatively, in the margins.
Well, I mean, in face of all these headwinds, it's not like you're saying, "Oh, let's not do this, let's not do this." You're saying, "Hey, let's do this. We could do this. This could be a win-win situation for all of us." And I think that attitude and that spirit is really admirable, especially I think representing a new type of building in a world that's resisting it. But let's say looking ahead, right? Like, what in your mind would be that one big change that will help modular reach its potential here in America?
I see a lot of people online talking about the revolution in construction, and I don't see it. I think it's an evolution. So I'm not one of those guys that says this one thing is going to change everything. I think it's a whole lot of little changes that we're going to look back in 10 years and go, oh, look where we are now versus where we were 10 years ago. So I'm a continuous improvement kind of guy. Let's make incremental changes over a long period of time, and then we'll, 10 years down the road, we'll say now we're mainstream for a lot of these people. But that doesn't mean we're not doing anything about it. There are, as you probably know, the terminology is all over the place in terms of what this industry is: industrialized, manufactured, modular, prefab, offsite. That was just 5 I just rattled off. We have industry standards, and we have 5 states that have adopted those industry standards. We need more states to do that. At the very least, it standardizes the terminology and how these buildings get approved when they're being built in a factory and not on site. It's not the local code official. What's the process for quality control and code compliance in the factory? We're trying to standardize the front end of that, which will help speed up the permit process, speed up the approval process, get the buildings on the ground a little faster. So we are working on getting more states to adopt our industry standards would be a big one for the industry.
So you talked about you have an event coming up. Maybe it's not so safe to go to Las Vegas, but can you tell us more about how, if people are interested, architects, contractors, developers, what this might be about and where they should go to find out more?
Sure. We have an annual event called World of Modular, and it's just that. We get people from all over the world that will come here to talk about best practices, case studies, network with one another. This year we had 1,700 attendees, which was the biggest crowd we've ever had. We expect that to go to about 2,000 next year. It'll be at the Bellagio Resort, April 20th through 23rd, I believe. Everything's at modular.org, but it's 4 days of case studies, networking, just peer-to-peer connections. And again, when I started, it was 300 people that were there. Now it's 2,000. And it's really, really cool that you have people from South America, Europe, Asia that kind of have the same issues and challenges there about modular as we do here. It's perception, it's adoption rates, it's, how do we sell this idea? So it's really neat to get people from different backgrounds and cultures to kind of share that same modular language that we have. So World of Modular, April, Bellagio Resort in Las Vegas, modular.org to find out more.
Wonderful. Hopefully some people will approach you about this conversation there. Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's been a really eye-opening introduction and also in-depth sort of understanding of how modular works, its implications, its challenges. And I think we're all aligned here in terms of trying to move the built environment forward, especially around housing, especially around affordability, and especially around sustainability too. As we always do on our shows, I'm going to ask you our final question. Given your perspective as somebody who's representing this potential new form of construction that I think we agree could really benefit society, how would you describe the era that we're in right now? Not necessarily just in the construction world, but in general, from your perspective.
The era we're in right now, great question. The first thing that popped in my head, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, and the times they are changing just kind of popped into my head when you asked me that. And I think that's true with the construction industry as a whole. We are growing. I'm very bullish on our industry, and I think the construction industry as a whole needs to embrace it and get on board. The housing crisis isn't going to get better. The skilled labor shortage isn't going to get better. We've got to figure out a more industrialized way to build, a more sustainable way to build all of our infrastructure needs, healthcare, schools, housing, whether that's modular or some other form of offsite. I'll leave that to whoever needs to decide it. But the times, they are a changing, is my era I'm in right now.
And I think they've always been a changing, right? And it's
They
wonderful
always,
to
that's
have.
the constant, is they're always changing.
Right. But I think that's why we do the show, is to take stock of how things are changing and make sure we're moving deliberately and purposefully. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing at MBI. It's definitely gotten my interest. And like I think I mentioned before, I'm getting more and more interest from developers, clients, collaborators on pushing for modular. And I think that's going to only increase moving forward.
I think so. I hope so.
Well, thanks, Tom. One last plug. If anyone wants to reach out to you, talk to you, learn more about MBI or modular construction, where should they go?
Our website is simple, modular.org. It's a hub for all things modular construction related. So go there. You can find my contact info there, research papers, events, webinars, everything.
Okay, we'll be sure to bookmark that one. Thanks, Tom, for your time. Thanks, Libo, again. Thank you all for listening to Most Podern. Please like and subscribe. We'll join you again next week.
Most Podern.